I've seen teams publish hundreds of pieces of content only to realize none of it is moving people to take action. Most marketing teams produce content but have problems with conversions. This episode is about how audience development works when it's tied to outcomes instead of output. To explore this, I'm speaking with Sarah Toporoff, Head of Growth for Headliners Disco, who focuses on helping organizations turn contextual content discovery into measurable listening behavior and long-term audience growth. I'm Christina Moore. This is A Mind for Marketing, where leaders explore the thinking behind real impact.
Hi, I'm Sarah Toporoff, and I am head of growth at Headliner, looking at audience growth for podcasts, both on the publisher side and the brand side, and doing a lot of business development.
So most teams for brands and organizations, they're producing more and more content more than ever. And there's like a huge amount of distribution. There's a lot of churn going on within those teams, but they're not getting the results that they're looking for. They're putting content out on social media and they're not getting any conversions. So where is it going wrong? What's happening?
Yeah, I would say that whether that's a media brand or like a more commercial brand, can learn a lot from best practices in tech. I'm a big evangelist for like agile methodology, and testing and iterating. I mean, I think, pure agile is quite strict and not a fit for everyone, but I'm a big proponent of non-tech teams necessarily, like kind of adapting and adopting methods inspired by that. So that can be like working in 2-week sprints, like having really attainable short-term goals that don't rely on a bunch of other people. Because I think when you have huge projects, you never see the end of them and they just keep getting extended. And people hate that. Another thing that I would say is you don't see enough of product teams integrating with content teams. But yeah, I was working a lot with newsrooms on trying to promote cross-functional teams. So I was running events that were basically prototyping sprints, hackathons, very 2010s coded, all the rage. But yeah, we would essentially get a journalist, a designer, and a developer. We'd bring them together to build a product together. And the result was definitely greater than the sum of its parts, because you are from the moment of conception, you have, the editorial person saying, what's going to work and what's not for what they're trying to accomplish. And then the product person, like bringing the realities of their expertise into the fold, and making sure everything's kind of flowing well in terms of design consistency, user experience. And you don't see enough of it. You still don't see enough of it. And I think any kind of organization, whatever different competencies and different teams they have, would endlessly benefit from more cross-functional collaboration.
Sure. So you're saying that one of the reasons why marketing teams are perhaps, missing the mark in terms of their conversions is that they're not working well enough or effectively enough with other areas in their organization, for instance, like the tech teams, where actually once you collaborate, you could come up with kind of a fair few ideas on either plugging the holes in conversions or ideas for capturing eyeballs or ears.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think, any team or individual that's working in isolation is less effective than when you're in collaboration, which is maybe obvious, but ways to put it into practice is maybe having like, maybe starting with a quarterly, kind of design day in which you're pairing people and you're giving them kind of a goal or something to tackled, and giving people a day outside of their regular tasks to work with someone they'd never worked before and try to tackle that. And that whatever is going to come out of that day is only the prototype, but it can lead to something that's going to have more impact in the long term.
Sarah has worked at the intersection of content and product, helping publishers and brands think beyond the publish and hope distribution model. And that matters because one of the underlying issues she's pointing to is that audience development isn't just a marketing function, it's shaped by how teams work together. So I wanted to take that further. If teams are structured in a way that limits collaboration, it's not surprising they misunderstand how audiences grow. So where do CMOs get this wrong? No, you've worked at the intersection of tech and content. I'm keen to get your perspective on where do senior members, specifically of marketing teams, where do they misunderstand audience development?
So for the better part of the last decade, I've been really specialized in podcasting. So it's really interesting to kind of see where podcasting fits into this mix. And you see this in brands that are making podcasts, or in podcast agencies or studios that are making podcasts for brands. I think sometimes, well, I guess not in the specific podcast like production studios, but brands are kind of seeing podcasting and audio right now, like they're kind of treating it like they treated social media in like 2008, where they were like, oh, this thing is here, like I guess we have to be there. Can someone just like hire an intern about it, or like outsource? Can someone just like take care of it? Because like we just need to tick this box, but we don't really want to put any effort because we don't really know what the impact is. And so obviously a brand would never like treat their social strategy like that in 2026. But they're still treating podcasting like that. So sometimes you see like one person wearing all the hats when it comes to like the audio workflow. So you have the same person like booking guests, editing scripts, and then also like handling audience development, whereas these are all very different jobs. And so more and more, I think people are realizing, and hopefully people at the top are realizing, that you need specific people to do with specific areas of expertise to kind of handle all of that. So audience strategy is definitely one of them. I'm seeing more and more specific audience teams at, whether that looks like on the brand side, integrating podcasting with their audience strategy team, or on the more audio specific agency side, not just having one like project manager per show, but really having a dedicated audience team that's looking at growing the shows like kind of across their slate.
We've discussed now what goes wrong. Let's have a look at what good looks like. You've probably in equal measure seen, how organizations handle it terribly, and then also how organizations handle it well. What signals a good approach to audience development?
When it comes to audience strategy specifically, I think the three pillars, you have your owned media, your earned media, and your paid media. All three of these are important, right? You need to like make sure the house is clean before you invite anyone else in. That's the owned media. When it comes to podcasting, making sure your episode titles are engaging, making sure you've got good thumbnails, good scripting, good audio. Audio quality does not have to be perfect, but it needs to have, listenability. And so and you're not going to get that right away, right? You're not going to get everything right away. So, if you have episodes regularly coming out, done is way better than perfect, and every episode is going to get better. And then making sure that you're taking advantage of all your owned channels. So whether that's social, whether that's internal communications channels, anyone, newsletter, making sure there's nobody that has a touch point with your brand that doesn't know about your podcast. That's really important. Earned media, you can do PR, you can do stuff, looking around, different calendar dates, like if there's any of those like silly days that National Cupcake Day or something, whatever your brand is, but making sure like you're making your content an event that's able to be picked up easily, whether that's by podcasting platforms or media. And then paid media, which I think podcasting has been really shy about historically. Like it's somehow cheating. Like paid isn't taboo, right? And so yeah, when it comes to paid, I think having a smart and diversified strategy is also super important. You need those that owned and earned to be consistent as well. But doing paid in a smart way is something that I've been trying to hammer home.
It's important to accept that paid isn't a shortcut, it's a tool. That example in Paris is a good illustration of what changes when audience development is taken seriously. Every activation had a role, every channel had a purpose, and importantly, it was tied to real-world outcomes.
One example I like to give is a show that I worked with that was a show that was produced by a big department store in Paris, who were doing a full kind of brand pivot to try to be more identified as a fashion brand. And so the show, had, celebrity kind of fashion oriented host and bringing in different celebrities to talk about their relationship with their personal style. And every paid activation had a really specific goal. And so one of their paid activations was partnering with podcast influencers and actually hosting a live episode, a live recording, a live event with their community in the store. And one of the goals for the show was drive to store. And so creating an event with these people who don't necessarily have a relationship with this department store, but have a relationship with this podcast host, having them in the space, I was like, that is so smart, right? Yeah, we worked with them as well on paid media and kind of placing their episodes on different publications, Elle, Vogue, whatever, these fashion associated brands, to kind of recommend their content to folks that are already engaging in fashion and style content.
A lot of teams are publishing regularly. They're active on social, they're investing in production, but the audience pathway isn't clear. The conversion point is vague and the team can't easily see what's helping or holding performance back. That's exactly why we created the Content Power Score. It looks at how well your content is set up to perform. You get a clear view of what's working, what isn't, and what to fix first. The link is in the description. That was an example of what good looks like. Where would you say brands are either overspending or ineffectively spending to acquire attention that doesn't convert?
I think that still a lot of times the marketing budgets aren't matching the production costs. So like if you take like cinema, like the marketing budgets can exceed the production budget sometimes, or at least be comparable. Podcasting, there's not at all that mindset yet. I think, and the French market was definitely leading the way. There aren't any production budgets that go out that don't also have marketing budget as like line items in kind of the overall what do you say? I have the word in French, like estimate.
Oh, sure. The
Yeah.
budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But it's still not enough, right? I'd say maybe if maybe you'll have a marketing budget that's like a third to half of what the production budget is. But it really should be like the same, right? Also, more and more I'm kind of seeing folks repurposing old content. So we work with old evergreen content. Um we work with a like a luxury jewelry brand, and they have a show that's been going on for 11-12 seasons. And what they do is they'll re-release episodes, but they won't just re-release them kind of, like they have a re-editorialization strategy, right? And so, like, for example, in February they released a new season, but it was all old episodes, but everything kind of had a love hook, right? So I don't know, like historical engagement rings or whatever. Yeah. So I think being smarter about the productions that you have invested a lot in terms of getting creative around the distribution is something that I would love to see more of, rather than just keeping producing without the marketing strategy necessarily behind it or as an afterthought.
So that was a really good tip, Sarah, and something that in my history of broadcasts that we would do all the time. We would, go dip into the archive, re-editorialize that, and make new programs. So I think that's definitely something that brands and organizations can take from publishers and broadcasters. One of the things that I wanted to circle back on was, and you touched on it earlier, was that sometimes brands are spending time and or money, let's say they're spending resource in areas that they don't necessarily need to, or they're trying to achieve the wrong goal with those levers. Can we have a look at a few of those?
Yeah. So in paid podcast marketing specifically, you can kind of think of it like I think of it as a funnel, but like with kind of 4 different sectors, right? So you have all the activations that you can do like within podcasting, right? Those can include buying programmatic, buying host read ads within other podcasts, doing feed drops with other podcasts. Some apps will allow you to do kind of featuring as well, and those are great but kind of limited because the podcast audiences are limited. And then when you're targeting a specific show or a specific network, if you're buying programmatic ads like, hey, listen to my show, that the KPI for that is impressions, right? It's not necessarily conversions, but that's more, it's reinforcement, right? That your show's out there, that your brand's out there. And then in kind of the non-podcasting side, you have a lot of, really mature marketing channels. You have paid social, you have paid video, you have classic PR, you even have, out of home. I think the thing that people don't understand necessarily about a lot of these is that they're not going to drive direct conversions to your content. They are all kind of impression based, right? And that's why the technology that I work on is called Disco, like Discover. We use programmatic display buying, but we actually embark an audio player in the publisher environment to be able to allow audiences to listen to your show directly in article, like on the page. And so that is, we call it performance, which is actual listens, which is conversion. Conversions can mean anything, but it's people with ears on your content. And we do have a guaranteed listening model. There are a few solutions out there that will deliver campaigns based on guaranteed listens. And I would say always do your homework and ask the questions explicitly, like, how are these listens being generated and where? And also, like, check their work. I think one thing that we've been doing a lot of recently is really pushing folks to use attribution. So it can be like pixel-based attribution, to really, we offer full transparency on how and where, as in which publishers are generating these listens. And we're always going to be click to play. So every listen is going to be an opt-in from the user who saw the image, clicked play. I can do everything to get the content recommendation in front of the most relevant audiences possible. And also offer, full transparency with third party verification that these listens are actually being delivered where we say they are. And one thing that's really exciting right now with attribution is that we can actually track longer term listening and impact beyond the initial listen that was delivered by the campaign. We work a lot with Magellan AI. We work a lot with PodTrack. And what we've been seeing is when you're able to kind of track a user journey from the initial listen, and then you use an attribution window of 7 days, 2 weeks, up to a month, you can see how many episodes that person is listening to on their other apps, and it's all hashed IPs, so we can kind of identify and extrapolate. But just to give you an idea, like we just ran a campaign where we saw 19% of listeners listen to a fifth episode in 30 days after the initial listen was generated by the campaign, which is really exciting. And so that means that there were a lot of other people also listening to episode 2, episode 3, episode 4, but like 19%, 5 episodes from one guaranteed listen. Like I was like, I knew we were good, but I knew we were that good. Like, that's cool. That's cool.
That is a really, really good result. So let's go into where we're heading in the future. You've worked at the intersection of content and tech, and you see a lot of things. You've worked for organizations, you've worked for publishers, you've worked for brands. Where do you think the future of audience development is going?
Podcasting specifically has a huge advantage when it comes to LLMs. Because what LLMs are looking for is signals across the internet of like credibility. And because podcasting is by nature incredibly distributed, it means that there's a lot of places that your brand is on the internet with like, all these consistent messaging, but it's like across all of these apps, across YouTube, across, if it's getting, picked up in any kind of content recommendation. But just by its nature, podcasting is going to have these like multiple signals that are really, really positive for when LLMs are indexing content.
AEO, although as much as SEO people hate the idea of AEO, but I think that AEO is slightly different. I do believe that it's slightly different. And I think the work that people can do behind that is going to be key to audience discovery in the future.
But again, it's also just like making sure your content is clean and your tags are organized, and it's like we know how to do these things, like do them. Like
all the foundations are still the same.
And it's all still human first, right? Right, like a human to be read by humans, and then that's, I don't know. I that's ultimately what's going to please the soon-to-be overlords as well. If we teach them, I guess.
Yeah. Everything Sarah's described, from collaboration to experimentation to audience-first thinking, isn't just strategy, it's a mindset. What are 3 mindsets that have carried you well throughout your career?
I like this question. I was thinking about it, and I think one that I I always remind myself is that it kind of goes back to what I was saying about like partnerships instead of, you know, hierarchical relationship, is that anytime you're, you know, pitching to a brand or interviewing for like a new job or an employer, like you're also interviewing them. You're assessing whether this is a good fit. And kind of, it's like dating, you know, it's really like, are we on the same page? Can this work together? And then it really, I think once you take yourself out of that, like, I need this, or like I need to prove myself or to please this person, then you actually come off a lot more like collaborative and relaxed. And I also think that, you know, if you don't get the job, if you don't get the client, it's again like dating, like it's only a waste of time if you didn't learn anything. And I will say, actually, can we get into our personal story, Christina?
Of course, absolutely. Go ahead.
I would say that like
It's
that was
podcasting after all.
that was I kind of talk about how we met a lot, because I was kind of getting out of the, you know, journalism NGO space, and I wanted to move into the more audio tech space. And you used to work at Apple Podcasts, and there was an opening at Apple Podcasts, and we had, you know, met through radio days vaguely, like it was a big, you know, Zoom call with a lot of people. But I reached out to you specifically, and I said, you know, can you offer me any tips for this Apple application? And you know, and you did, and you were very gracious. And you also said, you know, have you ever heard of pod install? And that was a French technology at the time, which I had heard of, but they weren't super on my radar. And you said, you know, we were doing some consulting with them, maybe you should reach out. And actually that ended up being my first job specifically in podcasting and a specific product. And then that has been, you know, a through line ever since. And that was maybe 2020-ish. Yeah.
Around that. Yeah.
So I didn't get the job at Apple. I didn't need the job at Apple. I probably didn't want the job at Apple. But you know, it's kind of, you talk about the strength of weak ties a lot. And that's a really good example. Which really leads me into like my other kind of mindset that I wanted to touch on, is like never be afraid to ask. Because yes, never be afraid to ask, because people literally 9 times out of 10 will say yes, of course. And then again, the one that says no, you're interviewing them, like it's not a fit. That's fine. That is fine. But like I have been so just like consistently like pleased and awed and humbled by just how open people are. And you know, maybe we're in a happy podcasting bubble, but you know, I remember also when I was kind of trying to navigate getting more into audio product, I had a colleague who had seen a speaker at a conference who was, you know, working in public radio product in France. But she's English originally, and I wanted to work more in France, and you know, French is not my first language, and I wanted to work in audio product, and they were like, you know, so like I tend to look for like women who have kind of, you know, international career backgrounds, who are about 10 years on in their career from me at any given point, and I'm just like, hey, like, can I buy you a coffee? And like in that case, like again, extraordinarily open, so gracious, so open to talk. And you know, I've done this multiple times, and like these have been people that have been touch points. So whenever I'm at a career pivot, or when they are, you know, and so yeah, like I think people don't want to hear no, but the no's are really few and far between, and the yeses are worth the risk, you know. I don't know.
I would agree with you on the last point. And, you know, the no's do happen. You do happen.
Not a fit.
But
Not a fit.
yeah, exactly. But it's not a fit. And the yeses are always worth it more. They're always worth it so much more. I think they're really good mindsets to live by. So thank you very, very much.
I don't know if that was 3.
Very
That was like 2.5, but
I do. You can use another. You can have another one.
No, a third one because I was thinking about it. No, it's kind of the same as the other two. It's just I think if you always like lead with kindness, openness, and curiosity in whatever interaction, like that's what you're gonna receive.
Sarah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate that you took the time to speak with me today. A very enjoyable conversation. If we reflect on the start of this episode, the problem wasn't a lack of content, it was a lack of conversion. What Sarah has laid out is a different way to think about it. Audience development isn't distribution and being everywhere. It's about structure. It's about aligning teams, channels, and content around a clear outcome. And most importantly, it's about designing for what happens after attention is captured. If you were to take anything from this episode, it's this. Don't ask how to reach more people, ask what happens once you've reached them. Thank you for listening. My name's Christina Moore. This is A Mind for Marketing. And if you're curious where your own content strategy needs to transform, take the Content Power Score. The link is in the description.